And the floor is yours. Thank you again, Arianna.
No, thank you, Pasquale, for organizing this, and thank you for being here. I'm glad to see familiar faces, and I'm very honored actually to be part of this project and to contribute to the webinar series of FOMATPLAY, Freedom of Movement Discourses. And yes, so with this presentation, I'd like to share with you some theoretical and methodological reflections that I actually developed out of my research projects, and included how, for example, I revisited the concepts of counter-discourses and counter-ideologies, but also how I attempted to humanize my research data via, for example, the inclusion of the lived experiences of refugees and asylum seekers in my corpus of data, and by means of a participative approach in online and discourse ethnographic research. And I will also say a few things about how I put in practice this actually very important thing, which is reflexivity, but also how I engaged in positionality practices to deconstruct my role as a researcher and to engage in a more authentic conversation, I would say, with my research subjects. And then I will, yes, share with you some conclusions. Just to, yes, give you a little bit of context, although Pasquale has already mentioned a few things about my work. My research project focused on the resistance practices as articulated by a group of asylum seekers and refugees on the social media of Twitter. And I worked with archival data. So my thesis was actually, in my book, actually is also developed into 3 different sections: the tweeting refugee and the imagining refugees, which work with archival data, mainly basically tweets, and the speaking refugee, which works with interview data, since I collected 12 interviews with research participants, of course online, given that they were, some of them were still incarcerated at the time of the interview. And some of them had been already released, but anyway, these have been conducted online. So the aim of my research project were manifold. That is to examine the counter-discourses that were articulated on Twitter through approaches, a mixed method approach, that is corpus linguistics in combination with the discourse historical approach, but also to analyze the visual discourses that were produced by asylum seekers and refugees on Twitter through the multimodal critical discourse analysis, but also I was interested in how they were constructing their identity vis-a-vis the identity of others by means of the discourse ethnographic approach, and in particular in the interview format. So we all know too well how over the past decades the migration phenomena have been intensifying globally, and we also know that at the same time mainstream media and political discourse have actually instrumentalized and politicized the refugee issues and started represented the issue, the migration phenomena, in ever more polarized ways, and also by portraying, of course, migrant subjectivities through massification, depersonalization, and dehumanization strategies, meaning in derogatory and harshly exclusionary ways. And in particular, politicians have been framing the refugee issues as a burden, a threat, a problem. And at the same time, neoliberal discourses also emerged, meaning that they would portray asylum seekers and refugees as individuals that could not be actually used by or integrated into the socioeconomic system of Western societies. And at the same time, Islamophobic discourses also have been constructed to associate migrant subjects with the Islamic threat. And therefore, they were being constructed as morally incompatible with the Christian values. Sorry. This is coupled, of course, with the fact that migrant subjects' own discourses have been absent, underrepresented, and misrepresented in Western media industries, which resulted in the fact that, in turn, migrant subjects were being constructed as apolitical, anonymous, but also voiceless subjects, meaning they were stripped of their individual histories and stories, and they were being deprived of their own intellectual, but also human and political capital. And this, of course, mirrors the fact that public space has been regulated or is regulated anyway, by hegemonic discursive regimes that, of course, tend to prioritize given voices and contents while, in a way, hiding or marginalizing others. I think that this is a very interesting way of framing this whole thing, meaning that Georgiou actually highlighted that while refugees and migrants were hyper visible in the public sphere, and they became ever more popularized in institutional but also everyday communication practices, their voice was actually absent. And this, of course, implied that the hypervisibility of the subjects did not necessarily equate to having a voice and having the possibility of determining themselves. Although there is a theoretical recognition that actually the role of migrant subjectivities, although there is a recognition in the field of CDS that migrant subjects might actually have a role in the way they represent themselves, empirical studies that center their perspective remain basically scarce in the field of CDS. And in particular, while CDS research has been focusing on how discourses or on discourses about and against migrant subjects, for example, I'm thinking about the literature that has been produced on populism or xenophobia or racism, white supremacy, and other exclusionary ideologies, counter-discourses and self-representation practices constructed by them have been scarcely explored. And this is a very interesting quote that I really like to mention. So much is written about refugees, but I would say also migrant subjects, but little by or for them. So this presentation seeks to address this gap by highlighting the need for scholarly attention actually to turn to the counter-discursive strategies that are used by marginalized individuals to navigate this extreme form of exclusion. And I guess that I came up with this question, that is, how should we as researchers address the paradox of visibility and invisibility without necessarily perpetuating the same representational imbalance in the academic setting? And according, for example, to anthropologist Malky, this attempt to ostracize the counter perspective of excluded individuals is part of the so-called strategic silencing, or the architecture of silence, which refers to, and I'm quoting here, the ways in which visibility and media attention are accompanied by invisibility. There is a tendency to produce headlines, but not to engage with the refugees and migrants themselves, or the historical roots of conflicts and complex reasons behind migration. At the same time, Nikkunen argues that while analyzing anti-migration discourses is very crucial to, in a way, dismantle but also unveil the mechanisms of othering and stereotyping, researchers actually risk overlooking those alternative spaces of appearance, as Hannah Arendt would call them, which are strategically actually produced in other realms of media. So in my case, for example, it was Twitter, since I decided to focus on that specific platform. But of course, refugees and asylum seekers were involved in a number of different social media. And of course, digital media emerged in my case as conflictual sites where refugee and other marginalized voices could emerge and contrast in a way and dismantle the dominant and mainstream discourses. At the same time, for example, Van Liemt and Bilger have argued that refugees, and I'm quoting here, perceive their identity to be very different from the one that is ascribed to them, challenging the idea that they're not affected by manipulatory discursive representations, and that in a similar way has stated that actually refugees may be interested in the label that they are given by others, but they may also object to it. And it is precisely this labeling which entitles them to the right to replicate. And otherwise, mobile subjects, the two scholars continue, have good reasons to present and represent themselves in a certain way in order to be able to organize their survival. And this is the end of the quote. And from this perspective, I actually argue that this is a discursive kind of survival too, which of course allows them to resist malevolent discourses on the one hand, but also to exert their self-representational power and their agency too. So in terms of the theoretical reflections that I wanted to share with you, counter-discourse and counter-ideology were given priority and centrality in my doctoral project. And although we all know that the assumption that power can be contested and resisted lies at the very heart of CDS research, when reviewing actually the field of literature of CDS, actually I realized that less amount of work had been done on defining, but also investigating these two concepts, counter-discourse and counter-ideology, but also less research had been done on how these contestation practices could actually discursively happen. And bearing all this in mind, I guess that I came up with these two questions that guided my research practice. That is basically, how do oppressed subjects and individuals discursively counteract interlocking systems of domination to regain their self-representational power, but also how is counter-discursive resistance enacted from below? In order to reply to these questions, of course, I reviewed the definitions of discourse, and these are some of the most, let's say, well-established definitions. That is discourse as social action, which is manifested through verbal and non-verbal practice, but also discourse as constitutive of and constituted by the social reality, which implies, of course, a dialectical, multi-layered and articulate relationship between the discourse events, but also the situation, institution, and social structure in which this discourse is framed. And in a specular way, I try to conceptualize counter-discourse as linguistic, social, and political counteraction, which actually has the power of making ideologies explicit by exposing and undermining conventional assumptions that, of course, perpetuate and reinforce these different systems of domination. And in this regard, actually, counter-discourses, I think, are very pivotal to raise awareness about the social inequalities to which these subjects are subjected, and but also they're crucial because these subjects can embed their ideological interests in producing these counter-discourses too. At the same time, given that ideology has been conceptualized as common sense assumptions, which are implicit in the conversations according to which people interact linguistically, and of which people are generally not consciously aware of, and this is very important in what I argue. Counter-ideologies then can be conceptualized as explicit, but also unconventional assumptions individuals are made aware of through counter-discourses. And in this regard, actually, counter-ideologies can be imagined as being shaped on the acknowledgement of a subjugating power that is enacted by a hegemonizing group against hegemonized one. So these theoretical reflections actually could, in a way, counterpose the criticism that actually CDA is a blame game that does little or nothing to foster change. And in terms of methodologies, these, of course, resulted in humanizing my research data. And this was achieved through triangulation, defined technically as the mixing of data or methods so that diverse viewpoints or standpoints cast light upon a topic. So I basically integrated the lived experiences of my research subjects into the research data by means of, as I was mentioning at the beginning, the discourse ethnographic approach. And this was also crucial to, in a way, do justice to the complexity of the migration and existential also trajectories of the individuals and groups that were participating in my research. And humanizing the data also implies the going against the quantification or the so-called numerification of human beings, since we all know that migration phenomena are usually represented through quantitative frames, especially in political and media discourse, for example, statistics, infographics, figures, maps, and other numerical representations. So I wanted to, in a way, bring in the stories, but also the feelings, the thoughts, the hopes, the passions of these people that were contributing to my research, and not maybe reduce them again by means of yes, quantitative research methods only to numbers and numerical representations. And these basically according to Nikkunen, contribute to the dominance of a management mindset, especially when talking about governments and the political field, whereby numbers actually only appear to be value-free, but in fact they operate to construe different forms of knowledge that orient us to think of the issue through a certain lens. And of course, I'm thinking about the politicians here. These, of course, allow them to represent themselves as being in control of the migration phenomena by means of these different numerical frames. And just to give you a concrete idea of how this translated into, sorry, I'm just moving you, yes. Into my academic practice. So I attempted, of course, to explore the discursive specificity of my research corpus, and I divided the keywords that I found into thematic groups according to the semantic similarity and relatedness. And the themes that I came up with, as you can see, were diversity, violence, health, humanity, justice, time, place, and history. And as you can imagine, these tweets were anyway very dense in terms of discourses, and the themes were also overlapping. And then I mapped out the different rhetorical strategies by which these refugees and asylum seekers are using Twitter actually frame their own discourses. These are the keywords that were matched with these themes that I came up with. For example, refugees, diversity, and the discourse then was the one of diversification. The keywords here: torture, suffering, treatment, and then the theme was the violence, and the discourse was the one of dignity and condemnation. Keywords here: suicide, hospital, pain, treatment. The theme was health, and the discourse was emergency and urgency. Rights and protest. The theme was justice, humanization, and so on and so forth. Whoops. Okay, so for example, of course, from the in-depth analysis, it emerged how asylum seekers and refugees articulated a wide number of discourses and counter-discurses. And for example, the discourse of diversification was identified here, in which refugees asserted their ethno-national diversity, a religious diversity too, and cultural specificities. Here, for example, Beretz Buchani is mentioning these, saying that we created the democratic resistance, different people, different nationalities, religions resisting together, which goes against, I guess, the topos of the homo nationalis, by means, of course, this imagined homogeneous community is idealized by politicians when arguing for expelling these people and marginalizing these people. I guess there's somebody. Okay. And another identified discourse was the one of humanization, in which refugees attempted to affirm themselves as part of the human community. And of course, rebalance also the asymmetry between the anti-refugee rhetoric that attempted to dehumanize them. And here, as you can see, there is a lot of repetition in terms of we are humans, we're human beings, our flag is humanity, please consider us human beings and stop politics, etc. And so on. And then the discourse of equality and the legitimation through which refugees refer to statutory acts and legal frameworks to, in a way, re-establish and re-implement a juridical system that has been dismantled in Europe. That is happening too. And also to legitimize their voices. For example, here, Imran Mohammed and Abdul Aziz Adam are making references to the 1951 Refugee Convention or Geneva Convention, but also to the 1967 Protocol. And they're also here, for example, Abdulaziz is making reference to the UN Declaration of Human Rights and which calls for respect, dignity, liberty, and equality. And of course, while citing international treaties, they try to attribute also legal value to their tweets, and their, I guess, also legal authority to their claims. And something that I wanted to, well, here is the list of discourses and counter-discourses that I mapped out in my corpus. Something that I wanted to emphasize is that migrant subjects counter-discourses do not only exist, of course, in opposition to dominant political or mainstream media discourses, but they are produced in relation to them. And I will maybe quickly touch upon the interlocutors that this Twitter users had while tweeting. And at the same time, I guess that for a migrant subject discourse to exist, that doesn't need to be a violent discourse, or that in a way tries to annihilate the subject producing the discourse. And but of course they were trying to compensate the hyper presence and the dominance of this very violent anti-refugee rhetoric. And this is, of course, substantiated in the interlocutors that they were, communicating with while using Twitter. And this, of course, in a way, makes us reflect about the polyvocality of social media that actually allow this heteroglossic environment to exist. And just to mention a few things about their interlocutors, I identified political representatives, but also other refugees, in particular Beritz Buchani, as you can see here, since he was considered a digital initiator of the movement online, and he was the first to smuggle actually the phone into the detention center, and then to document the violences and the abuses that were happening therein. And then we have news media and broadcasters, which enabled in a way a symmetrical dialogue between the refugee and the media, and by which, of course, refugees try to intercept and get in the media system themselves, and so on. Okay, now I would like you to jump on board. I was mentioning, Pasquale, that I don't really like monologues, and then maybe this could be a fruitful moment to exchange how you would or how you have yes, spotted but also analyzed counter discourses if you ever have, and yes, so if you want to maybe yes, take some time to read and to also drawing from your own theoretical but also methodological background and toolkits, if you want to share how you would deconstruct this counter discourses. For example, here we have Erfandana, who was a refugee that was actually in the Sekupang shelter in Indonesia, and he's saying, and because people coming from like Muslim countries or from, sorry, okay, or from other countries, some of them, were radical people and they were trained, in a terrorist network, in a group, and they were transferred, they were smuggled into a third country, and they blew themselves somewhere. And that sparked or created a very dangerous image in the public mind. So some people still, let's say, a large population of the people still think that the refugees are terrorists, that these are the labels. But when I say that, how do I portray my identity? I said that I'm a refugee and I'm a genuine refugee. I'm very much ordinary. So I don't know if somebody wants to jump in and share how they would I don't know, in terms of discursive strategies, but also topoi, but also anything.
I think there is a sense of awareness about how your words also give way to your identity, or how your identity and your words actually interplay. So yeah, I really find that super interesting.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yes. Anyone else?
Um, yeah, just to add something, I was struck by obviously the last part in which there is, I say that I'm a refugee and I'm a genuine refugee. I'm very much ordinary. So this maybe rewriting the exceptionality of refugeehood, so sort of saying that this is something that happens and so on and so forth against the discourse of exceptionality that is that of the terrorists that she mentioned before. I don't know if that's useful.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for sharing this. Yes, basically, here's something that I also found very interesting was that, yes, there is a certain degree of awareness in how they, in a way, acknowledge the fact that these discourses, violent discourses exist. For example, here, he's saying that these create this, terrorist, Islamophobic discourse, whatever, created very dangerous image in the public mind. And I was thinking about, this cognitive link that is created, and he mentioned that as well. Also, according to the socio-cognitive approach by Van Dyck, in the mind of the people that are exposed to this constant association of, immigrants, terrorists, and so on and so forth. So yes, he's trying to, in a way, severe this link between this discourse against, or this Islamophobic discourse with the genuineness of his being a refugee, or his ordinary identity too, because he's saying, these are the labels. And when I say that, how do I portray my identity? I said that I'm a refugee and I'm a genuine refugee. I'm very much ordinary. And yes, this actually, I think, to me at least, it meant going back to the humanity, to the ordinariness of human beings. And I found this excerpt quite illuminating in this regard. And there's also this, which is quite interesting as well. They always torture a part of the society for their votes. So this is Moza Zimitabar who's speaking about politicians, and somehow some countries are coping this method, this cruel policy, yeah. And unfortunately, they're ordering refugees for 20 years, and the way they call us or blaming us as bad people, Boti, Medivac, detainees. Sometimes they call us child abusers, extremists, jihadists, whatever. And it helped them to create fear. They're driving fear into the nation that refugees are bad people. But I'm here to tell everyone that we are people seeking safety and home. We're people seeking freedom. We're not criminals. Refugees are not bad people. And they are justifying it. They are justifying this type of behavior, when they're torturing us and they call us bad people, they justify this torture, of course. And yes, again, here, I guess that what Moza Zimitabar is doing is to basically dismantle this rhetorical apparatus around, again, this anti-refugee rhetoric. And I think it's very interesting how he's listing the referential strategies that these politicians use when constructing discourse against migrants. So referentials such as child abusers, extremists, jihadists, but also bad people, but also Boti, which is a Seneduki, I guess, that in a way refers to how they would go to attempt to go to Australia. And Medivac detainees. This is the Medivac law was the law that was implemented to evacuate asylum seekers and refugees that were in very critical conditions in the detention centers. And in this case, they would be evacuated from the detention center into Australia, and then they would undergo psychiatric or anyway clinical treatment to then be sent back to the detention center. And it's interesting how he's playing with this Medivac law in this way. Yes. So maybe this is another interesting one as well. I can contribute to this society, to our planet as much as you do, if the opportunities are being distributed equally. So because I don't have access to the opportunities that you do, that you have, that does not mean that I'm less human than you, that I'm less human or less person than you, or I'm a social burden on you. I'm not a social burden. I have motivation. I have interests. I'm sure that I can work on the farm. I can water the farm. I can shovel things. I can drive, and I can drive a truck, or I can build a house. I can do this. So I think I'm not a social burden. I'm not a burden on you or anyone else. I don't know if there are comments here or reflections or some thoughts that you want to share.
I think it's interesting that that there is also again awareness of how, I suppose, discourses portray migrants or refugees, and the burden kind of metaphor here is really big. So just it is kind of shocking to find that there is awareness about those metaphors, which are kind of just derogatory, I suppose. But of course, they're so aware of how to name or use these labels, of course, to shift blame into them, because so yeah, it's kind of painful, I think, to see that this is, I mean, they are very aware of those labels going on. Yeah, that was just a thought.
Y yo creo, Arianna, si me permites hablar en español, I think that está también la reflexión del hecho de no estar dentro del grupo, ¿no? Y entonces de expresar calidades que puedan hacerla, que el grupo lo incluya, ¿no? Entonces, expresar todas sus calidades, oportunidades que puede ofrecer a la comunidad que lo excluya.
Sí, 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 claro. I will switch to English, Francesca. Yes, I also thought that here there is this topos, I guess, of or this trope of the unequal distribution of resources. That is something that actually is very recursive in the whole corpus. Actually, they complained about the fact of being excluded from resource access in terms of anything, basically, basic needs, but also even those refugees that were then integrated into via bridging visa into the community. They could not work, they could not study. So this was a leitmotif that accompanied the discourse of these asylum seekers and well, the refugees. And of course, yes, there is a need to belong. And actually, in another excerpt, the same refugee was saying it was yes, articulating his unbelongingness in a way or through the topos of neither nor. So I do not belong to Indonesia because I'm detained in here, and even though I'm a refugee in Indonesia, I cannot actually have access to the community by working or studying. I do not belong to Afghanistan because I was tortured there and I was persecuted because he was an Hazara refugee. So he was there was this ethnic cleansing of Hazara people in Afghanistan, and he was one of those asylum seekers that went to attempted to go to Australia to seek asylum. And of course, he does not belong to Australia either because he never managed to touch the Australian soil. So yes, absolutely, there is a lot actually, yes, and it was super. This is something I think that is a cognitive bias that we as researchers have as well. I mean, when I was conducting my research, I had this bias, meaning, oh, these people might not be, yes, might not know, might not be in the loop of the media discourse that is so violent in Europe, but also in Australia, but also in the States, but also elsewhere globally. But no, they are. They are so truly aware, yes, about all these discourses that circulate against them and on them, and that yeah, that was very painful. That is there is the adjective that I would use too. Maria Cristina, maybe you were saying something.
Yeah, Arianna, thanks. I was also thinking, reading this quotations, this text, I was also thinking about in terms of self-affirmation, because it's all about I can contribute, I can drive a truck, I can work on the farm. So it's all about what they can do. It's sort of reclaiming what they are, their identity, their possibilities, and that was interesting. I guess I can contribute to this society. That's all very powerful somehow.
Yes, and in fact, yes, this is something that I was trying to yes, articulate in my theoretical reflection, that they try to exert their agency, but also their representational strategy. The thing is that they are marginalized, negated visibility, and they, of course, via social media, they did find their own way of emerging out of this yes, silence that and of course Australia has been also quite, the Australian government actually has been very in a way accurate and efficient in silencing at an institutional level, but also at a media level the whole actually carceral regime that they were putting in place I mean, they have been actually enforcing over these 20 years. So yes, this is something that is quite powerful to see and read, and these people exist. Yes. Okay, just to finish off, something that I also applied in my in a way, methodological framework was this participative approach to research, which rejects, of course, a passive observational attitude, and it requires the researcher to be an active observer participant by adopting, of course, a posture towards the discursive setting under investigation. In my case, for example, I was trying to repost the tweets that refugees were publishing on Twitter, but also I tried to sign the online anti-government petitions that were being circulated by the pro-refugee associations that were working in Australia at the moment. For example, I also, yes, collaborated with some refugees that were artists, and they were trying to translate. For example, there were different musicians, and they were actually publishing music from the detention centers, and I translated the lyrics into Italian. So I mean, I did try to do and to contribute to their struggle too. And yes, according to Kozinets, of course, active engagement exists along a continuum of different practices. And this can, of course, unfold in terms of self-identification as a member, repeat contact, reciprocal familiarity, shared knowledge, etc., etc. And the participative approach, of course, aligns well with the notion of participatory internet as well. So I was trying to collect these different digital artifacts in terms of course, the digital corpus that I built, tweets, but also I tried to collect collateral material, for example, videos, images, newspaper articles. And something that I was trying to do was also to go back to the refugees that I was in contact with, to engage in follow-up discussions, for example, on how I was interpreting the data. And this was actually quite crucial for, in a way, I was trying to give back the authenticity of what they were saying and articulating and framing in their discourses. And this is, I guess, a practice that could be also useful in, yes, creating a more authentic relationship with our research participants, but also to avoid this extractivism approach that we might risk, in a way, showing when, yes, or engaging in when doing our research. Just to finish off, basically something that I also used was the usage or the production of reflective field notes. This is a crucial tool to monitor and elaborate the feelings that might emerge throughout the research process, in the researcher's heart and mind. And of course, this was useful to also develop a sense of insider knowledge and to, in a way, monitor and keep track of this relationship, the evolving relationship between the researcher and between myself and the research subjects. And reflexivity is something that is not so common. I've never seen that in the field of CDS. And I think that especially when working with radically marginalized people, it's very important to engage in deconstructing or self-positioning practices. And especially in relation to our roles as researcher, because we might not maybe be, for instance, when I was working with these people and I was conducting my research, I would often, of course, reflect upon my privileged position in terms of how I was, yes, carrying out my research in very safe places, and they were incarcerated at the time, so some of them at least. So this would, of course, cause some sort of, yes, hard reflections to go through. And this was a very useful tool for me to just, yes, map out my emotions and feelings. And of course, yes, it would be useful to socialize with the research subjects as well. And I did try to keep contact with some of them, even when the research process was done. Sorry about this block of text. So this is my reflective field note that I produced. Maybe I will just read it through for you to have an idea of how this can be done. So as a researcher, I acknowledge that the research has been shaped by sociocultural norms that have, sorry, I need to put this elsewhere, internalized and inevitably influence the epistemological choices of the investigation. I also acknowledge the differences between the refugees and myself in terms of race, gender, class, educational background, the discipline, the power relations between the researcher and the research participants. As a matter of fact, I have operated from a position of material and symbolic privilege, conducted my research under compensation, affiliated to a recognized institution, and as a member of an international academic community with its invisible infrastructures of privilege. I was born and raised in a middle-class family in a developed country, which is far from being war-torn or affected by any civil conflict or religious war. I belong to the white dominant national majority, an ethnic community that does not face stigmatization, discrimination, persecution, or ethnic cleansing. Moreover, the research has been conducted from safe places such as the city, university libraries, my supervisor's office, my home. Even though I have been working for a couple of years in close contact with migrant subjects as an Italian teacher in Naples City, and have attended a two-month training course for volunteers in asylum seekers and migrant services, I felt the need to consult with an ethno-psychologist for best research practices anyway. And I have also been in close contact with migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees as an activist by taking part in pro-refugee manifestations and protests, and by joining community projects involving refugee subjectivities in the city of Naples. As a consequence of my political activism, it was always clear to me that I wanted to prioritize the bottom-up viewpoints, but also on the ground on my personal relationships with research subjects and the refugee community in Naples. I have been aware of the possibility of exploiting misunderstanding and misinterpreting the refugees' voices, as well as failing to deal with their emotional and psychological traumatic experiences. Since the very beginning, I strove to prioritize the wellness of research participants during the whole research process, and I committed to the development of an approach oriented towards social justice. Sorry, this is the positionality, actually, note that I wrote. I did not share, yes, I did not insert my field notes. But anyway, these are not, this can remain hidden, and yes, can account maybe for the personal journal of the researcher in, yes, dealing with this sensitive data and sensitive topics. Yes, and I want to conclude with this terminological note. So as researchers working in the field of migration, I think we need to be aware of the reductionist nature of the labels that, and there are many, that surround mobile subjectivities, such as refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants. Of course, these labels do not do justice to the complexity, as I was saying before, but also the ethno-national, sociocultural, religious, gender, age, diversity, whatever, and uniqueness of personality that comprise the human beings that are included in academic work. And something that I reflected upon also when I was writing my book was the fact that I wanted to consider these self-identification practices that were emerging throughout the research process. And I think that CDS scholars could align to these self-representational practices once these labels have been embraced by refugees themselves. For example, this was Erfandana again, this refugee that was participating in the research. And he was, again, framing this self-identification process in terms of, yes, the fact that he feels he is actually a refugee. So he was saying no one who lives in exile, who lives in turmoil and left this country feels bad to be called a refugee or asylum seeker, because this is our identity. I cannot hide it. I cannot kill this identity. I cannot demolish it from the root. Look, this is who I am. I'm a refugee, and it's not a problem. And it's not a problem to be a refugee. I said it's not a problem to be a refugee because it is only a label. It is a name that people give you. So yes, I basically embrace the usage of the term refugees. Of course, I used it when I was talking about my research participants, but in the other cases, for example, when I was quoting literature produced by other authors, I was aligning and sticking with the labels that particular author was using. And of course, this is a choice that I made out of political conviction, because of course, being a refugee is a fundamental universal human right, which is enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and it's nothing wrong with using that label. Okay, just to conclude, so as I was saying at the beginning of the presentation, my work, I think, wants to suggest that while it is important to elaborate theories and frameworks to analyze power structures that are institutionalized from above, that is basically top-down discourses. It is similarly, actually most importantly, I would say, from my perspective, to elaborate a framework that also systematically explores how counter-discourses and counter-ideologies are enacted from below, so bottom-up discourses, basically. And also, well, something that I try to share with you today was that when dealing with extremely marginalized subjectivities, such as asylum seekers and refugees, it is advised to recognize and to, in a way, empower the human quality, the human nature of these counter discourses. And this, of course, just to recap, can occur via the humanization of research data and the incorporation of qualitative methodologies such as discourse ethnographic approach, but also through practices of reflexivity and positionality and participative approaches. This, I guess, is very crucial also to in a way, understand and relate to research subjects not as objects of inquiry, but actually as experts and agents that are capable of voice their own stories of injustices, abuses, and human rights and violations, but also their stories of hopes, dreams, and passions. And of course, to recognize the human, political, and cultural and social capital that they have as human beings. And hopefully, this presentation, but also this actually I have published, or anyway, I've written up an article on this. Which will be published, I guess, next year, that I've presented also in another symposium in Valencia last year. And hopefully this article presentation, whatever, will open up new lines of critical investigation in this direction that maybe combine corpus-driven but also critical discursive research to hopefully, again, challenge sedimented beliefs about who has a say and who has not. So I guess this is all, and thank you for listening. Muchas gracias. Merci, grazie.
Well, thank you so much, Arianna.
Thank you for listening.
You can see everyone's clapping all over the place. So thank you so much. I think it was a really, really interesting presentation, and I'm sure that there must be comments or questions from some of the people here. I think what I was thinking, this is an offer. I think you could very well hold a session where you sort of talk about these reflective turn in terms of what we are doing with FOMATPLAY, which is something that, well, because we were looking at other things probably, and we are still looking at other things, probably we will need to think about how we could situate our own analysis of these interviews from a reflective kind of practice or grounding, so that we can also become aware of, or self-aware of who we are as a group of researchers, and kind of contribute to that reflection process, which I think it is so necessary. I was also interested in your comment that reflective practice is uncommon in the field of CDS. Well, I think it's very powerful. Coming from a few years in the Faculty of Education in the UK, I found that self-reflection and reflection practice is very important as one of those main practices. But yeah, to be honest, I hadn't thought about it in the field of CDS. I don't know, maybe you want to say more about that. And what can we do about it, maybe?
Yes, thank you for these comments. And of course, I'm glad to contribute to the whole research practice in the specificity of the FOMATPLAY project as well. So we can keep the conversation going. And yes, in terms of the self-reflective practice and self-positionality, this is something that actually was quite obvious. And to me, when I was, for example, reading about other research that had been published in other fields of studies, for example, post-colonial studies. And when I was attending for example, some seminars and some online, because it was during the COVID-19 pandemic, basically, that I was just, reading, and I was doing my PhD, and I was, doing my research and, getting informed. And I noticed that in that field specifically, this self-positionality practice was much more ingrained. And for example, there were people that would open up the seminars by saying, this is what I am, this is who I am, and this is how I position myself towards the research subjects, but also the research topic that I'm going to talk about. And that was when I was like, okay, maybe this is something that in a way could be incorporated in my own research practice as well. Especially because I felt that I needed to deconstruct myself in terms of the biases and the misconceptions that I was entering the research with. And so, I basically started, taking some notes, but also talking with with Catherine, but also with my other mentor, Omito Figen, who's an activist who has been very, very active in a way in the whole in these years, and also of course the people that made the most powerful contributions were the people that I was engaging in conversation with while I was talking, for example, in the interviews with these asylum seekers and refugees. They taught me a lot, an awful lot. And I was, of course, it was difficult. And I believe that if I could have had access to like a psychological consultant, whatever, I would have actually taken advantage of that, because they were in their discourses, in their narratives, they were, in a way, again, re-elaborating their traumas. They were sending me pics of really awful things that were happening inside the detention center. And they were, being I was their witness in a way. And they were just delivering this awful, horrific reality to me in all these different ways. And that actually pushed me towards this self-reflective and self-positionality practice, which I felt I needed to incorporate into my research practice to be able to just contain and reflect upon better, maybe. Yes, I don't know if that answers your questions, but
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it does. Okay. Questions or comments, guys?
Yeah, just to continue on that note, Pasquale, I think actually in migration studies, the post-colonial studies, and Stuart Hall, as I know you quote also Stuart Hall recently, he was in Naples at L'Orientale, and there's a whole school of doing this in post-colonial studies, as Arianna was saying. So some of us have been thinking about it for a long time, but today in CDS, I mean, it's really emerging with Arianna and with other scholars. Also, Vivian Resende recently has spoken about it, and I think, yeah, I know also Cristina is an expert as well. Yes, so I think, as you were saying, it can really add this layer, which is really, really important. And there are, I was struck by a work by Lili Kuliaraki, who also said that in some studies, when you think about the representation of migrants, you can also have a kind of not only active discrimination, but also the humanitarian stance is quite a problem. Whereas when there is the possibility of self-representation, you are put in a different position where there is, equal communication. So I think Arianna today, brilliantly, showed us how that could be done. But yes, it is really interesting that even when we think that we are doing good, somehow often we silence migrant people, So I think, as you were saying, it would be lovely to sort of continue this, also for FOM. So thank you. Thank you for all the brilliant conversations we always have. Thanks to FOM.
Yeah, I was thinking we could maybe come up with, I mean, that nice text that Arianna shared with us. I think we should probably do something like that, like in terms of collaborative activity where we actually think about, what, systems or institutions and power ideologies we belong in and where we come from and stuff like that. And that could be very, very powerful, I think, also in terms of then how we come to the interviews and analyze them. Yeah, and I was also thinking that most of the sort of reflection that comes from more specifically from corpus linguistics is around the use of methods and triangulation opportunities to make sure that we have, but just but again, it's all about trying to achieve more objective approach to the phenomenon while we retain depth of analysis. But yeah, looking at this kind of, how you can position or you should position yourself as a researcher, that is really powerful, and it gives you extra insight into the data and the process in which you analyze the different interviews or whatever for that matter that you are analyzing there, which is, yeah, excellent. Okay, guys, any other comment or question? If not, lunchtime is. Henry, you wanted to say something? I'm not sure if I interpreted your just muddy movement.
No, I don't feel legitimate. I missed about sort of 3/4 of your presentation, I'm afraid. So I only got the end, but very interesting. But yeah, I'll try to listen again if you share it. Anyway, thanks. Yeah, sorry.
Right. Okay, guys. So I think we have our next seminar will be in March, if I remember well. So more details will follow soon. So thanks everyone, and thanks Arianna for sharing your research with it. I learned a lot today. So it was a fantastic opportunity to listen to fantastic research.
Thank you. Thank you for listening and for having me.
Research members. Okay, guys, enjoy your Tuesday.
You too.
It's only Tuesday.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you,
Bye.
Arianna.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Arianna.
See you soon, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.